Hello everybody and welcome. Today I'm going to be ranking the driver lineups of the F1 2024 teams. Now for the first time in as long as I can remember, possibly ever, there are no changes to the grid from last season to this season, but there are changes in how I'm going to be viewing some of the drivers based off of their performance last year. So without further ado, we've got our tier list here. First down to 10th. Okay then, kicking things straight off, let's jump in. Number 10. The horrendously named Stake F1 team. And I'm not just putting them at the bottom because they've got a stupid new name. This, of course, is the team that was Sauber Alfa Romeo last year. And the driver pairing of Valtteri Bottas and Guan Yu Zhou quite simply doesn't excite me. Bottas has never been the most eye-catching Formula 1 driver. In his prime at Mercedes, Valtteri Bottas was a decent pair of hands, able to match Hamilton in qualifying at times and sometimes step forward when Hamilton was off the boil. But we haven't really seen that spark in the Sauber Alfa Romeo, and there's nothing that suggests we'll see it in the Stake. Not expecting much meat from Bottas. And he also hasn't really put a marker down over Zhou. In fact, at times, Zhou Guan Yu has had the better of Valtteri Bottas. On average, Bottas probably has been the quicker of the two, but not often or far enough ahead to create clear daylight and be anything near as comprehensive as it should be, in my opinion. As for Zhou, he's not a world beater, he's not a future world champion. I'm not very impressed by this lineup. 10th place. Okay, moving on to 9th place then. 9th place has got to be Williams, and it's a shame to have to do this because Alex Albon was absolutely masterful last season, just throwing in some great results that were beyond what that Williams should really have been capable of. But as you can probably work out, the reason they're down in 9th is that a certain Logie Sargent hasn't been pulling his weight. In fact, he's been smashing his weight into several barriers and costing the team quite a heavy amount of money. So you can't really rank them any higher than this, especially with such a high quality field. Albon's a great driver, deserves more, deserves better. But Logan Sargent is letting the side down, and he's probably quite comfortably the weakest driver in Formula 1 at the moment, I would say Logie Bear. Moving on to 8th place then, doing it on vibes, man, and how I feel in the moment. I'm gonna go for Haas in 8th place, which is harsh on Nico Hülkenberg, who did dominate Kevin Magnussen last year. But they're both very experienced, very old heads that perhaps their best days are behind them. Clearly, we've seen that Hülkenberg can still operate at a very high level, particularly in qualifying. But Magnussen wasn't really anywhere near. And in the races, Hülkenberg did slip back. And how much of that was due to him? How much of that was due to the car burning its tyres up? We don't really know. But Hülkenberg has never been the best driver on his tyres anyway. So I'm going to go with Haas in 8th. At some point, they are going to have to rejuvenate that driver lineup because it's not the most youthful in the sport, let's say. Which means that next I'm going to go with Racing Bulls, the new AlphaTauri moniker. The reason why I've put them in 7th, just ahead of Haas, is because I think Tsunoda and Ricciardo have a higher ceiling at this moment in time. Tsunoda has shown his ability to consistently finish 11th, and if he can consistently finish in the points, which he started to do, to be fair to him, at points throughout the season, and certainly with that result in Abu Dhabi at the end, there's something in there with Yuki Tsunoda. And likewise Daniel Ricciardo, if he can get back to his best, the pre-McLaren days, then what a driver lineup that could potentially be. But so far it's a bit if, buts and maybes for Racing Bulls, so I can't really put them any higher than I have done in 7th place. Next up, unfortunately, because this team has Fernando Alonso in it, I'm going to go with Aston Martin, and the reason is, of course, because Lance Stroll keeps repeatedly letting the side down. I've said it before, I'll say it again, I don't think he's good enough for this sport, for this category of motorsport. I think they should look to shuffle him out to their endurance program, which they're setting up, I believe, next year, 2025. Would probably be a good bet, you know, keep him at Aston Martin, but just not allowing him to consistently weigh down the Formula 1 team, which has Fernando Alonso in it, one of the greats, some people's GOAT. The results that Fernando Alonso had under his silky sleeves last season were absolutely unbelievable. You know, that string of podium finishes at the start, and whenever there was points on the table, even when Aston Martin was struggling, it was Fernando Alonso who was there and grabbing them. So while Fernando Alonso could certainly fight for a world championship if given the chance, and is one of, if not the best driver on the grid apart from Max Verstappen, Lance Stroll unfortunately anchors this team right down to 6th place. Just ahead of them, I'm going to go with BWT Alpine Formula 1 team, which has a very well complemented balance of drivers. Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly, probably the most evenly matched driver pairing in the sport at the moment is the Alpine team. Gasly and Ocon, of course, so close, and it's not that they were close in every race, it was that they were close in that they yo-yoed and were equally as inconsistent as each other in a way. There seemed to be weekends where Gasly was way out in front and Ocon was nowhere, and vice versa. They both got great podium results. They both had flashes in the pan. They both had results where they were absolutely nowhere and completely anonymous throughout a weekend, and ended up so close in the points with Gasly edging out Ocon that it has to be the closest matched Formula 1 driver lineup of the season last year, and I don't see why that would change going into this year. I don't think either of those two are going to win the championship, but if there's a race win on offer or a great result or a podium on their day, they can snatch it. 5th place. 4th place for me is probably the toughest one. I kind of had thoughts about this coming into the video, and it was between McLaren and Red Bull. The only reason Red Bull would be anywhere near finishing off the podium is because of Sergio Perez's woes last season. And McLaren had both of their drivers performing absolutely fantastically throughout the year, and I just see them as being level. Max Verstappen is, for me, comfortably better than Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, but Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri were both comfortably better than Sergio Perez last year. So it kind of averages out to about level. And the only reason I'm going to put McLaren in 4th place is because neither of their drivers have won a full race distance Grand Prix yet. Giving it to Red Bull, so I'll just put them in 3rd here straight away, because you know what I'm going to do. Because of A, race winning experience and pedigree, and B, Max Verstappen. Sure, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri could be future world champions, definitely future race winners. In fact, I think if they win a race between them, what if either of them win a race this year, or even both of them could, and Sergio Perez continues to struggle at Red Bull, I'm swapping these two around. But the brilliance of Max Verstappen, who is comfortably the best driver on the grid at the moment, and the fact that even though Perez struggled, he has got so much experience and he has got race winning pedigree, I've just nudged Red Bull ahead of McLaren. Sorry, McLaren fans, I hope you understand my logic. 2nd and 1st is also pretty tight between Ferrari and Mercedes, but I have decided who my number 1 is anyway, and it's not Mercedes. I've seen a lot of these lists and they've put Mercedes at number 1, and my thinking is, after George Russell's poor season and Lewis Hamilton, some mistakes are starting to creep into his game, and also the fact they're so close with each other. Their qualifying gap, I think George Russell was just marginally quicker than Hamilton throughout the season, so they're starting in the same grid positions and they're fighting over the same pieces of tarmac. It's boiled over several times and of course came to a head with that Qatar crash at the first corner. In terms of raw speed and pace, this is the best driver lineup on the grid, but we're not ranking that. Because I think when you rank a driver lineup, you have to think about how they complement each other. You have to think about when there's a race win on the cards, can they work together? Can they avoid acrimonious situations? Do they work well together, basically? And we're already starting to see the cracks starting to emerge. George Russell, the up-and-coming, very quick pretender to the throne. Lewis Hamilton, the wise old head, the 7-time world champion. They're clashing already, and they're going to continue to do so next year, which is why my number 1 driver lineup is Ferrari. Ferrari with Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. Pure and simple, the reason is that Sainz is always, apart from that mid-season stint, when the car is at its best, slightly behind Charles, about 0.2, 1/10 behind Charles Leclerc, which means that they have just got a number 1 driver, and their second driver is probably the best number 2 driver on the grid. He is a number 2. He's not quicker than Charles, even though he did get that race win last year, so he can't take too much away from Carlos Sainz. But he keeps Charles Leclerc honest. If Charles has an off day, Carlos Sainz will take the points. And if there's a 1-2 on the cards or a championship to be fought, Sainz is the perfect support for Leclerc, which I think makes a stronger driver lineup than Mercedes, who, if anything, are going to start taking points away from each other. That's my reasoning, and that's my top 10, and there are only 10. So that's my best to worst, basically. Let me know if you agree. I can understand why you wouldn't. There's some very close ones. McLaren and Red Bull is interchangeable, and Ferrari and Mercedes are dead close. And even though I think Mercedes are a quicker pair, I think Ferrari are a better balanced pair. Let me know what you think. Shout at me in the comments if I've got it wrong, as I bashed my microphone out of the way. Hope you're having a great day, and I'll speak to you all soon. Subscribe, give it a like, give it a comment. Lots of love.